Chapter 25 of The Princess Galva by David Whitelaw. This recording is in the public domain. Chapter 25. In the Death Chamber. A dark, silent chamber. A room magnificent and lofty, in which the far corners were shrouded in shadowy gloom. Edward lay in a half-consciousness, staring up at the ceiling. It caused him no wonderment that the ceiling was strange to him, and unlike any ceiling he had ever known, or that it should be carved and painted and rich with gilding. There was a faint, elusive perfume in the air that set him thinking of cathedrals, and from somewhere near him there came a droning monotone. He felt no definite pain now, only a sensation of lassitude and detachment. There was a strange tightness in the region of his heart, and he felt a little cold. Turning his head, he tried to rise upon his elbow, but a sharp pain took him in the shoulder as he moved, and he was glad to sink back again upon the pillow. The movement, however, slight as it had been, had left him in a position from which he could get a better view of his surroundings, and as he took these in he gave a little gasp and felt the beads of moisture pricking out upon his forehead. In the center of the room there was a bed, the four posts of which, richly carved, upheld a fluted canopy of dull red silk, from which depended heavy curtains looped up with tasselled cords. Upon the panel above the pillow an escutcheon was blazoned out in dull gold. Edward closed his eyes for a moment before he could make up his mind to let them rest on the figure which he knew he would see lying beneath the crimson canopy. He asked himself what could have been the cause of his, Edward Povey's, presence in the death chamber of the King of San Pietro. He opened his eyes and looked. Enrico was lying stiff in the center of the bed, the sharp points of his knees and feet showing rigidly through the white sheet which covered his body. The thin hands were folded peacefully upon the breast, and between the stiffening fingers had been thrust a crucifix of ebony, bearing a silver image of the Christ. Below the hands, too, Edward noticed that someone had placed a single bloom, a rose. The little flower stood out eloquently among the sombre pageantry of death, all the purer for its oneness, and he wondered idly whether it spoke of at least one who had truly sorrowed at the passing of the king, at one real regent. On the bed, at the foot of the dead monarch, were two cushions on which were pinned the several orders and medals which had belonged to Enrico. His sword, too, lay between them, together with his plumed hat and his field marshal's staff. On either side of the bed there knelt a sister of mercy, and it was the monotone of their prayers that Edward had heard when he first awoke. In an alcove by the great carved fireplace a thin spiral of scented smoke rose from a censer. 4 tall candles in silver holders made the space round the body an oasis of light, and in the cavern of shadow beyond loomed the strange shapes of massive furniture and the dull gleam of mirrors. The heavy curtains had been drawn across the windows, and there was no sound but the murmur of the women at prayer, and the occasional fall of a cinder on the stone flags of the hearth. The scene was eerie in the extreme, and Edward gazed in fascinated interest at the rigid figure on the bed. Enrico had been a handsome man in life, and with the passing of his evil soul his earthly dignity of aspect had increased. The head was lying well back and showed the noble sweep of the brow and the clean-cut profile of the high-bridged nose. A full beard, raven black and threaded here and there with gray, rested spread out like a pall upon his breast and reached to the clasped hands. Upon the sunken wax-like cheeks the firelight flickered and played ghastly shadow tricks in the hollows of the deep-set eyes. One of the nuns rose silently from her knees to attend to a candle at the head of the bed, which had been guttering in the little draught that had found its way into the still room. As the woman turned to resume her prayers, she saw that Edward, upon his pile of rugs in the corner, was awake, and she came with noiseless steps over to him. She laid a cool hand on his brow and spoke to him in a whisper. "You are not to talk, Señor. I have orders to fetch the Queen to you when you awoke." "The Queen? You call her that already? But she will be asleep. She—" He ceased speaking as the white hand was pressed over his lips, and he watched the sister as she glided noiselessly to a door that was concealed behind a curtain near him. In a few moments she had returned, and behind her Edward saw Galva, and a smile lit up his rather tired-looking eyes as she crept and knelt down by the side of the made-up couch. Very adorable looked the young Queen of San Pietro as she bent her lovely head over Edward Povey. Her hair, parted in the center, fell over her shoulders in two long plaits, showing their dark richness against the steel blue of the wrapper the girl had put on. Her face was a little pale, and there were dusky rings showing under the eyes which still held a suspicion of tears. The nun who had fetched her crossed the room and touched her fellow watcher on the arm, and together they left the room. When they were alone, Galva bent over towards Edward, and he put out his hands and took her little ones between them, and as he did so something warm fell upon them. "Why, Galva, what's all this? Tears? Why—" "Oh, Guardy, you are hurt, and I can't bear it. I would never forgive myself, never, if anything were to happen to you. It's my fault. "I don't know, Galva, whether I'm badly hurt or not. Sometimes I think I am. I don't feel much pain now, but there is a tightness here. Why was I put in this room, into the presence of death? Enrico in all his glory is hardly the best of company for an invalid." And he smiled a little. "It was the doctor, Guardy, the man who had been attending the king. He had you brought here as it was nearest, and he won't let them move you. He tried to find the bullet, but he couldn't. He is coming again in the morning. Who shot you, Guardy?" "Never mind that now, dear. I want to ask you something. I want you to tell me if I have been of use to you, if I have helped ever so little to put you where you are now, to make you Queen of San Pietro." Galva raised her head. "Why, Mr. Sydney, what a strange question. Of course—" "Not so strange, dear, not so strange. Don't call me Mr. Sydney, just Edward. And so I have really helped a little? I'm glad. Do you know, Galva, that I have always thought that in this life we are given our chance to combat the evil we do with good, to balance our account, as it were; that for every sin we commit, every wrong we do, we are given a whitewash brush, to use if we will." "I think so too, Guardy, but you have done no wrong. I won't believe any evil of you. You are all that is noble and good." Edward shook his head. "But you don't know everything. There are one or two little things which one of these days, when I am better, I will explain to you. Now go to bed, dear. This wrapper of yours is as thin as paper. In the morning I will explain. Yes, explain. Good night. Oh, by the by, that is your rose, I expect, isn't it?" And he pointed to the bed, and Galva nodded. "I thought so, you little saint. I don't know any one else who would have put it there. Now run away, dear. In the morning I will explain." The girl rose and leant over the wounded man. "Good night, Guardy dear, and God bless you," she said, and kissed him on the lips. She turned at the door and sent him a little smile, and as she went from sight behind the curtain, a sense of desolation came over Edward Povey. He thought it would be good to die like this, and perhaps it were better that there should be no explanation. He had taken on the mission of a man who was unable to act for himself, and he had carried it to a successful issue. All was right in the world, and he told himself that his own account was with God in his heaven. He became mildly delirious, and asked himself what more could he desire of the romance he craved, than to pass out of life here in this chamber, which might have been lifted bodily from a classic of the Middle Ages. What fitter surroundings than the tall sombre candlesticks, the praying women, the silence, and the shrouded figure on the bed? He turned his eyes to Enrico, and felt a strange sense of companionship. The pain in his chest seemed easier now, and the spasms were becoming less frequent. He lay between sleeping and waking, in a delicious sense of ease. He thought tenderly of Charlotte, and wondered if she would miss him very much if she were never to see him any more. There had been little real love, between them for the past few years, but in his light-headedness Edward thought of her as he saw her that day years ago, decked out in the tawdry white finery of their wedding morning, trembling beside him at the altar of the shabby little Barnsbury church. He called to mind the girlish, shrinking figure standing on the threshold of life, and he remembered that there were tears shining through the cheap little net veil. Then he went on through the years, through the hopefulness of it all, and the disappointments, through the troubled waters with their sun-kissed moments, to the dull-tinged sea of matrimonial failure. He could not really blame Charlotte. Her lot had been perhaps a harder one than his, after all. Even the journey to and from the city, the noisy companionship of the second-class smoker, the life of the gloomy counting-house, the snack of lunch followed by the grateful pipe smoked on the sunny side of Gracechurch Street, these had all been his, and he knew now how they had all helped him to endure those years in the little villa at Brixton. He wondered idly why God had not sent them any children. Little ones were so necessary to life. Charlotte and he would never have drifted apart if the wondering eyes of a child had been there to see. If there had been tiny rose-leaf hands to hold them to each other, it would have all been so different then. The blind at one of the windows had become disarranged, and through the aperture Edward saw the first sweet flush of the dawning. It was only a little glimpse, but he could see an inch or two of the horizon. Above the silver edge of a bank of stormy clouds that lay low over the sea, the coming day had barred the sky with green and gold and shell pink and glory. Gradually the light in the room increased, and the candles grew ghost-like, and the shadows lifted unexpectedly from the corners. The two nuns had re-entered the room, and one of them crept softly over to his couch and gazed down at the white face. Then she tiptoed back and touched her companion on the arm. "We will whisper our prayers, sister. Our little friend is in a delicious sleep. He'll do now. We must think of the living before the dead." End of chapter 25.